Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's going to be a little bit unstructured. If you have any questions, just ask. We can kind of combine the Q&A session. When you asked me to come talk, I had no idea. I thought I was just filling like 10 minutes of like a panel. And so it's a lot of time to kind of talk about Lucy's, but so I am the owner of Lucy's Lab Creamery, and really I think today I just want to talk a little bit about my story. So I think in the grand scheme of my life, Lucy's will be an interesting thread in that, but kind of where I'm at now is a culmination of a lot of things that have happened in my life and really my family. So I think part of today I'm going to talk a lot about myself and my family and our background, and then obviously some about the store. So the common theme in Lucy's, I think with any small business, is struggle. Struggle and sacrifice and do whatever it takes to make it work. And I started Lucy's just kind of on a whim. I didn't really think it through that well. I just thought this would be fun. Let's just rush for it. I think a lot of entrepreneurs think that way. And I think if you talk to a lot of small business owners, they'll say one of the things you need to have is grit. When things get tough, figure out a way to make it work. So it leads me to a little bit about our family history. So that same kind of thread of grit and making things work is common through our family. So I'm going to start really, really far back. My great grandfather in 1942. So he was a young man. He was working at a hotel in China. He was a bellboy, and the Chinese government approached him and they said, "Would you like to be a spy for us? You know, there's all these Japanese government officials coming to visit this hotel. We want you to go through the trash, see what kind of correspondence is happening." And so he said yes. Fast forward to 1942, World War II breaks out, and Russia invades China. And he had told his wife, my great-grandmother, if war breaks out, take you and the 7 kids and flee to South Korea. And so she did. She took, war broke out, he got captured, taken prisoner of war. She takes 7 kids and hikes 600 miles over a course of months to Seoul, South Korea. And this is not just like a leisurely hike down Diamond Head, right? This is like through treacherous terrain. There are dead bodies everywhere from people that are not making it through the hike. I remember my grandma was 6 years old, and she was telling us this story of like, you sleep on the ground, then you wake up, and if there's some grass, you grab some grass and you eat some grass, or there's like a dead body and they have a little bit of food, you wipe away whatever's rotting and you eat it, because you either eat it or you die, right? So she tells me these stories and kind of puts into perspective struggle and what's hard and what's difficult. So long story short, they make it there. World War II ends, but they don't release my great-grandfather. They keep him prisoner of war for 20 years because the Chinese government kind of negotiates, oh, we want some prisoners, we want our people back. But because he's a spy, they thought Russia had turned him. And so they left him in a POW camp for 20 years. 20 years later, he gets released and then comes out. He goes to Taiwan and starts writing letters for 5 years, trying to find his family, right? No internet, nothing. This is the only way he can kind of make connections to find the family again. So after 25 years, they finally find some connection, and then reunite. So during this whole time, obviously this is kind of a big, crazy event that's happening. My mom was born in Korea. I think obviously they struggled so that my grandmother could have a better life. And my grandmother struggled so that my mom could have a better life. And my grandma kind of was a serial entrepreneur, kind of like myself, and just was destitute, but saved money to start a business and kind of make her own name. But in that process, she had to leave my mom to be raised by her grandmother, my great-grandmother. And so she grew up in Korea, moved to Taiwan, and I mean, so we're talking about Lucy. At 18, she met my dad. So my dad was 28, married, had a family. My mom was the mistress. And I look back and I'm thinking, you have to kind of understand the context culturally. Culturally, this is somewhat commonplace in Asia. She's like a young, impressionable 18-year-old that's getting attention from this big shot who makes lots of money and is very popular with everyone. And so she ends up a few years later moving to Japan for grad school. She goes to art school, and this relationship continues. And this whole conversation of, I'll leave my wife for you and whatnot, but help me with a few things, right? He was, I think, as far as she knew, in the import-export business. What that really meant was he import and exported hard drugs on a very large scale to Japan. And so, I just try to put myself in her shoes. She's kind of in a really weird, difficult spot, love to get out of it, but, also neck deep in that. So she had me after she graduated, about 24, 25 years old. And then shortly after that, I think my dad was trying to get out of that business, moved to the States, brought us to the States and his other family, and relationship kind of got deteriorated and got violent, and my mom left. And that's where kind of our story began. Although I was born in Japan, I grew up in Colorado with my grandparents. She left my dad to really just slave away at a restaurant for 20 years, 6 or 7 years in Colorado, and then we moved to Kansas. So I spent most of my childhood growing up in Kansas. As you can imagine, Kansas is, if you have the chance to go to Kansas, don't go to Kansas. It's so bad. There's nothing there. But we struggled. We lived in a trailer for $70 a month, and she waited tables and just did whatever it took to make ends meet. We moved here in 2000. I was a senior in high school, went to Kaiser for 1 year, and then after that, went to KCC and UH. My undergrad is in speech and communications. So I'm not proud to say, but I was a lazy ass for sure. I was one of those special students that took 6.5 years to graduate. So hopefully I have all of you beat. You guys will be much faster than me. But I remember my mom telling me my Chinese name is Wang Liwan, and Liwan means to rise late. So she would always kind of encourage me and say you'll do great things later in life. I don't know if it's bullshit, but it's just it's a nice thing to hear. So I graduated in 2009. She got news that she had stage 1 cancer. And this was, I had just started my first job as her professional tutor, so kind of like a teaching assistant for kindergarten.
and it was tough news to take. I think that's kind of what snapped me into overdrive. Up to that point, I had just like sat at home and played video games all day, and done really nothing with my life. And that was the moment when you realize if your family's not, like, she's my only family. If your family's not there, you have no safety. You have to make it work. There's no option for failure. The next step is on the street. So, got my act together, graduated, finished Dean's List, and kind of did my best to help her through that process. She went through radiation. I think that going, kind of being known for this, I've heard a lot of stories, and it's not like anything. It's not anything special. This is actually fairly common. People go through radiation, go through this, through throwing up, losing hair. And all. It's so commonplace. It's kind of scary, and when you're in it, that's your whole life. That's what you're dealing with day to day. So we got good news. She was all clear, and in 6 months it was stage 4. And come back with metastasize throughout the whole body. So stage 4 means, like, before it's stage 1 is it's localized. Stage 4 means it broke up in the bloodstream. It's literally little pieces everywhere throughout the body. So they gave her 6 months, and she lasted another 3 years, which is pretty remarkable. But by like 2012, I just started I was about 3 years into my real estate career. So after teaching for a year, I got into real estate, and it was a tough time because I was working 40, 50 hours a week. I'd come home at like 6 and change her, make food, turn her over, like literally everything she needed. And I'm definitely not a nurse. Like I have no talent to be a nurse, but it gave me an appreciation of what it really takes to care for somebody like that. So she passed away in 2012, and what's interesting to me is all the struggle that she went through. I had no idea all my life until probably about 6 months before she passed away. She's like, "Hey, let me tell you a few things." And she had hid all of this struggle and pain from me. And so, as like a young, unappreciative piece of shit kid, I didn't appreciate it whatsoever. And then in that moment, it's like, wow. Our parents do a lot for us, but then to like get all that dropped on me in that time was quite eye-opening. So that's kind of the homage to mom, right? It's all our moms do crazy, insane things for us that we'll probably never know. But I look at our lives, like if we're lucky, we all live maybe 80 years, 90 years, right? And first 20 years, let's just chalk up to school, right? It's whatever. But then you start living your life from like 20 to 40. She passed away when she was 51, so she didn't really live much of her life for herself. She literally went to school, got married, had me, struggled and raised me, and then passed away. So that's truly living for someone else. And I just felt like I had nothing to complain about, right? Like, my Uber driver was like rude to me or whatever. Like, it means nothing in the grand scheme of things. So it just made me feel like I needed to do something to commemorate the network. So after she passed away, I went traveling a little bit. Went to the West Coast, and there's all these really cool creameries. And I've always collected business ideas, just not sure what I wanted to do. And we're sitting in LA, there's this ice cream shop called Sweet Rose. And I remember it was December, it was 5 degrees, and there's this line out the door. And I was like, I'm gonna try this. This is salted caramel. Salt. This is disgusting. It's amazing. We're walking through this line. Everybody's shivering but happy, and then they scoop this ice cream and they pour some sea salt flakes on it. It's just like, no way. And it was just delicious. It was just amazing. It was this like immersive experience of being cold and colder, just loving it. And I was like, why is hot year round? Why do we not have more creameries and more ice cream in Hawaii? So it kind of got me thinking. And in 2000, I didn't do anything with it. Just kind of sat with the idea. And then in 2013, I was like one night we were making dinner, and then after dinner we made some dessert, and we tried ice cream. So ice cream is this kind of interesting blank slate. It's like a whiteboard that you can add any type of color you want to. You can add a fragrance, like a flower. You can add saltiness. You can add more sweet. You can add anything and come up with just like these crazy creations. And so the more we kind of investigated that, the funner it got. And so we would have just awesome creations and just like the most disgusting things you could ever taste. So like we tried, our first one was bacon whiskey. I was thinking, everybody loves bacon. Most people like whiskey. It's just good. And it was really good. We did orange peel Szechuan peppercorn, and it was just like, so disgusting. It was like peppercorn kernels just crunching in your mouth. It's like, ugh. But I think it's just the fun, and no matter how good or bad it was, the process was really interesting. And falling in love with the process was what made us want to pursue it further. So, 2014, I was neck deep in my real estate career. I was doing very well, but I just had this itch. This is really interesting it'd be interesting to take this to the next level. So we did a little taste test with a bunch of friends. We went to, I remember we took out like 4 huge coolers, spent 2 weeks making all this ice cream, hours and hours of, and then we took it down to Nocturna, invited 100 people, just had them all sample, and it was overwhelmingly positive. So I entered into my real estate company has this annual picnic, and they have a dessert contest. And so we entered bacon whiskey, and I remember just like all the aunties that have the cakes and pies and stuff, and they're just like, because we won, and they were just kind of shocked that, and you had to cook. You're like a single bachelor with no cooking experience can do that. So that gave us inspiration, and so I looked up a few schools and found this place in Wisconsin, and took a couple weeks off in the middle of December to go train at this dairy in Wisconsin to convert our small batch ice cream to big batch, and came back the following March 2014, and we started Lucy. So I don't know what to I'm sure some of you guys have ideas of aspirations to like start your own business and try new things. It sucks. It's hard. It's hard. What's interesting, I think, is everybody sees the fun, the interesting, the cool, sexy parts of owning a business, right? People say entrepreneur. Like, wow, he's an entrepreneur. But like entrepreneurs that hear that from each other, they like, we know, like you've been through the mud, and you've had long sleepless nights, and you've had worries that your whole business is going to fail. It's not sexy at all. It's really tough sledding, and I think that's a common theme. But
the flip side of that, the common theme is whenever things get tough, you find a way to make it work. And that's an experience I've heard through other entrepreneurs as well. So in 2014, I had a classmate that I graduated UH with. She ended up going to culinary school for a year at KCC. I paired with her to start Lucy's, and it was so much fun and really cool. Got a great vibe, great response from the public. And then I remember I sat down with her, and we had been friends for years. I said, "Are you sure you want to do this? Like, this is going to be tough. You live in Waianae, stores in town. You just had a kid, you know, and you're going to be sitting in traffic for 2.5 hours every day just to do this, and we're not going to get paid for a while." She's like, "Let's do it." 4 months later, she quit. So, it was tough. It was eye-opening. I was just like, I'm glad I had her for those 4 months, because when we first started, we rented a small, tiny little shared kitchen in Kalihi, and our days kind of looked like this. I still worked my full-time job. I would wake up and go to work at 7. I'd finish around 7 p.m., go home, take a shower, eat, get in the kitchen by 8. We were slaving over the stove from 8 to about 3 a.m., get 4 hours of sleep, wake up, do that for about 4 months straight. And that's what we had to do to be able to get it off the ground. So it was tough. And then we opened, and there's just this awesome feeling of like accomplishment. We did it. And then a month after we opened, somebody in our kitchen, because it was shared, they opened our freezer to see if it was what was in it, and they realized it wasn't theirs. They didn't close it all the way, and then like $10,000 worth of stock just melted overnight onto the floor. So we had to close the store for 3 weeks and remake all of the ice cream we had made. So closing the store is not the issue. The issue is telling your employees, we have no hours for you for 3 weeks, but please don't abandon us. Just sit around and do nothing for 3 weeks unpaid, please. And if I was them, I would have been out there gonna go find another job. But they were such troopers, and they stayed. And 3 weeks later, we reopened, and it was awesome. I really think any business you do, like it's ice cream or it's whatever, that stuff doesn't really change too much. It's the people. The people will make or break your business, whether it's customers or your employees. And if you have good people, they'll carry you through times where everything's on the floor. And they definitely did. So my partner leaves. I go back to splitting time between my full-time job and keeping the store open. And I think the main inspiration was I had a little bit of money set aside. I told myself I could either go get an MBA, or I could just like have a hands-on MBA, like learn the hard way. If the business went belly up, I would have all this experience, and on the flip side, I could make some money while getting all this experience. And it ended up all right. I mean, we started being profitable right off within the first year, which is pretty rare. And yeah, so after my partner left, things kind of stabilized. I found an awesome employee that kind of rose up to be manager and is still with us today. And it was just constant struggle though. Every day was like 2 wins and 2 losses, right? do well in sales and we maybe have a new wholesaling contract, and then we lose 4 employees and have to rehire, and some customer complaint, social media just like bites us in the ass, and how some people feel about our product changes, and it's always this constant up and down. But I think ultimately, kind of the training that I had gotten from real estate helped me stabilize. So during this, we just celebrated our 5-year anniversary. During the 5 years, whether it was real estate or whether it was owning your own business, you have to learn to be somewhat even keeled. Like you celebrate some of the small victories, but you don't get too happy because you got work to do the next day. You get work to do the next hour. And if everything goes to shit, you have to maintain composure because all your employees are kind of looking at you and looking for guidance, and there's no failure. Like you'll figure out a way to make it work. And so that continued constantly. So during those 5 years, I went back to school, got my MBA, did project sales for Howard Hughes. So I pretty much had like three full-time jobs, and it was a constant struggle. We went through new partners. I brought in another partner who was great moral support. He was one of my good friends, but didn't do much to like day-to-day operations was still on me, and that was really tough. And then it's kind of interesting what business will do to relationships, not just friendships. Like we're still that friend and I are still friends, but like business takes a toll on your personal life, sleep and stress and whatever. But like I think even relationships, went through like probably 4 relationships during that 5-year span, and some of you guys know Professor Rowan. Like I worked with him we're actually working with him on this other kind of startup project that's dating related. But what's interesting is when we first got into the EMBA program, they sit you down in this room and they say, 50% of you will not be with the person that you're with right now by the end of this program. And we're just like, that doesn't make any sense. Like half the people in here are married, and everybody's in like a long-term relationship, and then like literally 3 months, I told myself that's not going to happen to me and my girlfriend at the time. And like 3 months later, we're broken up because of the stress and the weight that is put upon you. And I think it's that compounded when you're in a business, when you're running a business. My friends and I always have this conversation of, people want to be with somebody who's driven and successful and want to kind of improve upon themselves. But in that desire to do that, you sacrifice a lot. You sacrifice a lot of time, sacrifice effort, and sometimes you sacrifice parts of the relationship to make that work. So it's there's days where you like want to quit, but you have to take all of that good and the bad. One I think main thing out of owning a business, I would say, if you learn nothing else from this experience, is there's this researcher. Her name is Brené Brown. She has this awesome TED Talk, and she's a relationship researcher. And really the gist of her research is about vulnerability. Why are we as a human cohort not as happy as we were in previous generations? And are we so medicated and alcohol dependent and popping pills and things like that? anyways, long story short, it's vulnerability. It's the ability to dig deep and understand that the things that make us uncomfortable, the struggles that we have, are what really builds us. And looking at those struggles is what helps us understand what will make us happy. So people that are the happiest in life will see struggle, but they won't shy away from that. They don't look at it as like, oh, I love that, but they look at it as necessary. And in owning a small business, those struggles are necessary. So embracing that process has helped kind of ensure that like whatever happens to Lucy's in the future, whether we expand or we sell the business or whatever happens, what we've built as far as ourselves can transfer onto something bigger and better. And so it's kind of what the business has been for us. I kind of went all over the place with that, but that's really my story and Lucy's story right now. So.